We shall see abundant examples of this happy state of mind in later lectures of this course. We shall see how infinitely passionate a thing religion at its highest flights can be. Like love, like wrath, like hope, ambition, jealousy, like every other instinctive eagerness and impulse, it adds to life an enchantment which is not rationally or logically deducible from anything else. This enchantment, coming as a gift when it does come, a gift of our organism, the physiologists will tell us a gift of God's grace. The theologians say is either there or not there for us. And there are persons who can no more become possessed by it than they can fall in love with a given woman by mere word of command. Religious feeling is thus an absolute addition to the subject's range of life. It gives him a new sphere of power. When the outward battle is lost and the outward world disowns him, it redeems and vivifies an interior world which otherwise would be an empty waste. If religion is to mean anything definite for us, it seems to me that we ought to take it as meaning this added dimension of emotion, this enthusiastic temper of espousal in regions where morality, strictly so called, can at best but bow its head and acquiesce. It ought to mean nothing short of this new reach of freedom for us, with our struggle over, the keynote of the universe sounding in our ears, the everlasting possession spread before our eyes. This sort of happiness in the absolute and everlasting is what we find nowhere but in religion. It is parted off from all mere animal happiness, all mere enjoyment of the present, by that element of solemnity of which I have already made so much account. Solemnity is a hard thing to define abstractly, but certain of its marks are patent enough. A solemn state of mind is never crude or simple. It seems to contain a certain measure of its own opposite in solution. A solemn joy preserves a sort of bitter in its sweetness. A solemn sorrow is one to which we intimately consent. But there are writers who, realizing that happiness of a supreme sort is the prerogative of religion, forget this complication and call all happiness, as such, religious. Mr. Havelock Ellis, for example, identifies religion with the entire field of the soul's liberation from oppressive moods. The simplest functions of physiological life, he writes, may be its ministers. Everyone who is at all acquainted with the Persian mystics knows how wine may be regarded as an instrument of religion. Indeed, in all countries and in all ages, some form of physical enlargement, singing, dancing, drinking, sexual excitement, has been intimately associated with worship. Even the momentary expansion of the soul in laughter is, to however slight an extent, a religious exercise. Whenever an impulse from a world strikes against the organism, and the resultant is not discomfort or pain, not even the muscular contraction of strenuous manhood, but a joyous expansion of or aspiration of the whole soul, there is religion. It is the infinite for which we hunger, and we ride gladly on every little wave that promises to bear us towards it. But such a straight identification of religion with any and every form of happiness leaves the essential peculiarity of religious happiness out. The more commonplace happinesses which we get are reliefs occasioned by our momentary escapes from evil, rather either experienced or threatened. But in its most characteristic embodiments, religious happiness is no mere feeling of escape. It cares no longer to escape. It consents to the evil outwardly as a form of sacrifice. Inwardly, it knows it to be permanently overcome. If you ask how religion thus falls on the thorns and faces of death, and in the very act annuls annihilation, I cannot explain the matter, for it is religion's secret, and to understand it, you must yourself have been a religious man of the extremer type. In the future examples, even of the simplest and healthiest-minded type of religious consciousness, we shall find this complex sacrificial constitution in which a higher happiness holds a lower unhappiness in check. In the Louvre, there's a picture by Guido Reni of St. Michael with his foot on Satan's neck. The richness of the picture is in large part due to the fiend's figure being there. The richness of its allegorical meaning also is due to his being there. That is, the world is all the richer for the devil having a devil in it, so long as we keep our foot upon his neck. In the religious consciousness, that is just the position in which the fiend, the negative or tragic principle, is found. And for that very reason, the religious consciousness is so rich from the emotional point of view. We shall see how in certain men and women it takes on a monstrously aesthetic form. There are saints who have literally fed on the negative principle, on humiliation and privation, and the thought of suffering and death. Their souls growing in happiness just in proportion to their outward state grew more intolerable. No other emotion than religious emotion can bring a man to this peculiar pass. And it is for that reason that when we ask our questions about the value of religion for human life, I think we ought to look for the answer among these violenter examples rather than among those of a more moderate hue. Having the phenomenon of our study in its acutest possible form to start with, we can shade down as much as we please later. And if in these cases, repulsive as they are to our ordinary worldly way of judging, we find ourselves compelled to acknowledge religion's value and treat it with respect, it will have proved in some way its value for life at large. But subtracting and toning down extravagances, we may thereupon proceed to trace the boundaries of its legitimate sway. To be sure, it makes our task difficult to have to deal so much with eccentricities and extremes. How can religion, on the whole, be the most important of all human functions, you may ask, if every several manifestation of it in turn have to be corrected and sobered down and pruned away? Such a thesis seems a paradox impossible to sustain reasonably, yet I believe that something like it will have to be our final contention. That personal attitude, which the individual finds himself impelled to take upon, towards which he apprehends to be the divine, and you will remember that this was our definition, will prove to be both a helpless and sacrificial attitude. That is, we shall have to confess to at least some amount of dependence on sheer mercy, and to practice some amount of renunciation, great or small, to save our souls alive. The constitution of the world we live in requires it. Entbehren sollst du, sollst entbehren. Das ist der ewige Gesang, der jedem an die Ohren klingt, den unser ganzes Leben lang und heißer jede Sonne singt. For when all is said and done, we are in the end absolutely dependent on the universe, and into sacrifices and surrenders of some sort, deliberately looked at and accepted, we are drawn and pressed as into our only permanent positions of repose. Now, in those states of mind which fall short of religion, the surrender is submitted to as an imposition of necessity, and the sacrifice is undergone at the very best without complaint. In the religious life, on the contrary, surrender and sacrifice are positively espoused. Even unnecessary givings up are added in order that the happiness may increase. Religion thus makes easy and felicious what in any case is necessary. And if it be the only agency that can accomplish this result, its vital importance as a human faculty stands vindicated beyond dispute. It becomes an essential organ of our life, performing a function which no other portion of our nature can so successfully fulfill. From the mere biological point of view, so to call it, this is a conclusion to which, so far as I can now see, we shall inevitably be led, and led, moreover, by following the purely empirical method of demonstration which I sketched to you in the first lecture. Of the farther office of religion as a metaphysical revelation, I will say nothing now, but to foreshadow the terminus of one's investigation is one thing, and to arrive there safely is another. In the next lecture, abandoning the extreme generalities which have engrossed us hitherto, I propose that we begin our actual journey by addressing ourselves directly to the concrete facts.